when I took on the form of being a businessman, I failed.
Interesting.
I got kicked out. I was self-serving. When I treat real estate as a form of ministry, I continue to live a life that I am so grateful.
Welcome to the Real Estate Is Show. I have a really cool guest today. He is on the big wall, Erik Hatch with Hatch Realty out of Fargo, North Dakota. It is not very often that I meet people from North Dakota. In fact, Erik, I think you might be the first person I've ever met from North Dakota.
The green sign that sits outside of Fargo, they just had to change the population because I'm here in Arizona now. And when you take out that heavy of a percentage of people, because North Dakota has about 750,000 people total in the entire state. The communities that I serve, Fargo, North Dakota, and Moorhead, Minnesota, as a border city, our two counties are 250,000 people. So to be able to be in a place like this where I could throw a rock in any direction, like Uncle Rico, I can throw a football over the mountain, but I can throw a rock and I'm going to hit someone here is not the case in North Dakota. You can throw and you won't hit anybody. Thank goodness.
That's awesome. So he runs a mastermind, a coaching program. You switched over to Real at some point. How long ago was that?
September of 21. So as we record this, it's been about 2.5 years, and I was independent. I was a KW agent for a lot of years, and I was a buyer's agent on the team. I was an independent agent, and then I did what everybody thought was the right choice, and that's, hey, go build a team. You're really good at sales, so disregard that skill tactic, and why don't you go and build a team instead? And so I did, and I failed miserably. We sold a bunch of houses, but it was a total dumpster fire. And I had great success. I was selling 60% of the houses that were on the entire team.
And when you say 60%, quantify that for me. 60% of what number? Like what was your team doing?
Yeah. So my first year of having a team, we did 192 transactions. Here, side note, people who have large volumes in higher price markets, they'll always tell you their volume. People that are in low price markets, they'll always tell you their transaction count. So my transaction count was in 2012, we did 192 deals, but I was 113 of those.
Interesting.
And the allure is, man, we sold 192 houses, but I wasn't helping anybody to have a big life. I had a bunch of time dedicated. I was making a bunch of money, but I didn't have successful people around me. And I was given the gift of starting over in the beginning of 2013 when Keller Williams kicked me out. My career prior to this was I was in the ministry for almost a decade. And so to be now in this place where I went from this goody two shoes, brown nosing, never want to do wrong kind of guy to get kicked out of my brokerage. I'm now the bad boy of real estate. There's nothing bad boy. The bad boy. Are you kidding me?
Is that why you shaved your head, to be more of the bad boy?
The receding hairline's why I shaved my head. Yeah. And I lost it all from real estate. So go figure. Real estate was always this fun extension of what I was doing, but I thought I had to be Glengarry Glen Ross. I thought I had to be Wolf of Wall Street. I thought I had to be Boiler Room, where I was functioning with like all of this savvy and machismo, and it was like, I'm going to just make as much money as possible. And it felt gross. It wasn't, don't get me wrong.
You.
I'm really financially motivated, but not for the money that I can have, but for the impact that money can have through me. Right. And that's for my family, but that's for the world. That's for the things I serve. In chatting with you, I told you I just got back from Thailand and we did mission work there on top of a great family vacation. Like, I think that's what I want in life, is I want incredible experiences while doing good at the same time. And so as I built my real estate career and I got kicked out and built it over again, and then was independent for 8 years before we landed with Real, that's been the North Star every time, is I just want to give more. And every time I give, I get.
Let's slow down for just a little bit.
I don't slow very well. So this is a challenge.
It's okay. Gooberneck was crying on the podcast last week. So if you cry, that's not
okay.
Don't be, you won't be the only one. Just kidding. So, but I want to understand where this desire, what I just heard from you is you were very financially motivated for, at the time, a lot of the right reasons, and what ended up being the wrong reasons as far as this team thing didn't end up being as successful as you had thought. And that's a big failure moment personally for you. But I want to dive a little deeper with you for just a sec. If you got into the ministry, you have a desire to serve, you have a desire for other people. Where does that desire come from? Like, is it come from your parents? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I was born and raised in Fargo, always lived there. My dad abandoned our family when I was 2 years old, and so never had a father growing up. And my mom worked 3 jobs just to keep us out of welfare.
So this is where your work ethic comes from, right?
Oh my gosh. My mom, Betty Hatch, had the most impeccable work habits and work ethic. And so it was this transformational thing for me. And so I watched her work exceedingly hard at the age of 14. Well, even prior to getting a job in the real world, I was mowing people's lawns and raking and selling whatever I could to try to make a buck because we didn't have any bucks. And so I recognized, like, what am I going to do? And then I got my first real job of working at a restaurant. And I love the idea of not making, at that point, it was, I think minimum wage was like $5 an hour. I didn't want to go work at the grocery store and make $5 an hour. I could go at the work at the restaurant. And if I was good, I could make 10 or 15 or $20 an hour with tips. And I was just drawn to it because my mom worked her entire life on being the best at what she was. And she got paid whatever corporate allowed her based on her education and her years of experience, not because of her incredible skill set. And that was always unnerving for me. And in fact, it proved to be this weird Achilles heel for my mom, because when I was 16 years old, I was on a mission trip in Mexico. My first experience internationally, my first experience doing large mission work. And I came back and I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do with my life. I'm going to be this incredible person that lives in the ministry, and I'm going to be this person that gives back. And on the drive home from the airport, I said, Mom, how was your doctor's appointment? And she said, well, it didn't go as well as I thought. I said, well, what happened? Well, she then tells me she got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer.
Wow.
And literally was given a 10% chance to live. And her only prayer was to see me graduate high school.
And you hadn't connected with your father again at this point, correct?
I would see my dad once every 3 years or so.
But emotionally or whatever?
There was never an emotional connection.
So losing your mom was like a big deal at that moment.
Yeah, well, she made it 5 more years. Like, she beat cancer with her 10% chance to live. And then when I was in college, it came back in April of 2001, and she just lived 2 more months before dying from surgery complications. And so my growing up happened really quickly. My call to ministry and purpose, I think, I've heard this. I was in a conversation with somebody yesterday, and we were talking politics. And I'll be clear, I hate politics. It just feels gross and it's divisive.
There's a lot of grossness.
Oh my gosh, and it's offensive to everyone. So if someone's listening right now, I've talked about religion and politics so far, so this is really great.
We'll get into sex in a little bit.
Okay, sounds great. I have pictures. Yeah, it's so wonderful. It's my favorite thing to do. So in that, we were talking, and we had said, oftentimes people say that when you're young, you tend to be a little more liberal because you have a heart, and when you're older, you tend to be a little more conservative because you have a brain. Mm-hmm. And those are insulting things for people that are on either side of the fence, because I do think heart and head exist in both. But for me, as a young person, I was all heart, right? Everything in my world, I wasn't trying to say, how am I going to now survive? I was taught survival tactics by my mom, and it was absorbed. It wasn't taught. She didn't ever say, Eric, let me tell you about how to be a great businessman. I had no idea how to be a great businessman. I just knew how to be a great person because I saw it demonstrated from my mom. Yeah. And I was able to value at a really young age the things that really matter. It was never about the stuff you had. It was about the life that my mom was, in her words, just a secretary. Worked at the local hospital in Fargo. She was just a secretary. She had 1,000 people at her funeral.
Wow.
You don't get to be Betty Hatch by being just a secretary. So it never mattered the title that she had. She was a person that was determined to make a difference in people's lives. She was everybody's favorite. She was everybody's favorite aunt, everybody's favorite coworker, everybody's favorite friend, because it's how she made them feel. And so I, at the age of 21, was given this gift of like, Eric, everything you do in your life needs to be intense and impactful. Mm-hmm. And if you play small, like my mom didn't have the savvy or the smarts, because I think that people get financially stuck. if you look at the DISC profile, 69% of people are high S's. They don't like change. They just want predictable and safe and steady. I'm not of that accord, right? I'm somebody who loves the other side. And my mom wanted safe and steady. And because she had my sister
You and your mom had different personalities.
well, we both were outgoing, but everything about her was, how do I protect what I have? And I didn't have anything. I literally had no.
Look, if I were interviewing your mom, or someday when you talk to your mom again and you have some deeper conversations, which I'm sure you're excited to have.
Yeah.
You know, I bet your dad leaving was very traumatic for her. And it caused I have to be the protector and the financial provider. And like, she had to take on your dad's role. You know, I'm sure for a woman, that's not an easy thing to do.
You know, single parents, men or women right now, I think it is the most thankless, underappreciated job that's out there, because she gave everything. She never missed a sporting event that I had. She was at everything. Wow. She literally worked 70 to 90 hours a week just so I didn't have to wear Payless shoes, because that was really important to me as a kid. Is I didn't want to look like the poor kid. I wanted the starter jacket that everybody had. I mean, we're about Jordans. The same age. Yeah, absolutely. And I did go with Reebok, I did go with Nike pumps instead of the Reebok pumps back in the day. So I wanted to be a contrarian. Yeah.
We'll pump up.
Those were something. So
I'm going to dive a little deeper with you, Erik. We don't know each other well enough, and I'm always cautious to ask really deep questions of people I don't know.
Ask away.
Hopefully you're open to this.
I am.
A funny story. I had a girl sitting here the other day, and I had a sex comment, and it really threw her off in the middle of the podcast, but I won't ask you that. Is your father still alive?
So let's talk full transparency. You know, my dad died about 11 years ago.
Was that hard on you?
It could have been. Yeah. And I was given the gift of it not being hard on me. And so here's full story. My mom, when she was diagnosed with cancer, was diagnosed with cervical cancer. Wow. And you get cervical cancer from HPV, or genital warts, right? That's the only way you get cervical cancer, to the best of my knowledge. And so my mom had contracted this STD that eventually killed her, either from my dad's countless affairs, or there was a time, my sister's 4 years older than me. There's a time before I was born, but my sister was born, that my dad got a phone call. He was a roofer, to say, Larry, you need to come into town for work. And so he left. And when he left, the guys who made the phone call broke in and stole my dad's money and all of his drugs. My dad was a drug dealer, stole his money and his drugs. And then they raped my mom.
Oh my God.
And so the story I told myself was that my dad was my mom's murderer. True or not true, I don't know. And it really didn't matter to me, but a visceral amount of anger flowed through my body. My dad came to my high school graduation. I was my class president, and I spoke, and he came to my open house and he said, Erik, you're the second speaker. Way to go.
Oh, wow.
And then he left 20 minutes later. And the next time I saw him was my mom's funeral, coming in reeking of alcohol, because my dad was a pretty aggressive drunk and drug addict, and wanted to now try to play the role of father that I had never had. And I went from sorrow and sadness to anger and bitterness, and it completely changed my grieving process, and it really complicated it. So for years, I kept my dad at bay. Now, fast forward 10 years later, I'm in the ministry, and nearing the end of my career in ministry. I did youth ministry and worship leading and that sort for nearly a decade, and moved into real estate full time. I had a youth group kid, his name's Graham, and his dad, who he had a tumultuous relationship with, was nearing the end of his days as well. And so I take Graham on. I'm like, Graham, I think you got to try to find a way to forgive your dad, because if you don't forgive your father, it is going to come back to bite you and haunt you in the weirdest of ways, and it's going to bubble up. Do whatever you can to find forgiveness for your dad. Write him a letter, have a conversation with him. He's not going to be here much longer, and I would hate for you to have that toxicity inside of you. And he looked at me and he says, all right, Hatch, you first. And I'm like, no, dude, no.
My story is different.
Like, come on, no, not me. I don't like. And so I went home and I talked to my wife and I prayed about it and I wrestled with it. And I'm like, have I forgiven my dad?
No.
And forgiveness was not inviting him back into my life. I want to be really clear on that, because oftentimes people think that forgiveness means forgetting, and forgiveness means you're now welcoming somebody with open arms. I was done trying to drink poison and having somebody else suffer.
Yeah.
I was done holding venomous anger towards my father because it didn't serve me well, and because I looked at him for the first time in my life with empathy instead of anger.
That's a very godlike view of somebody.
It took a long time.
Right. To be able to look at somebody with love, because empathy is love, right? It's a form of love. That's really tough. Transitioning back into business, I'm lucky enough my dad's 92, 93 actually. I know a lot of times in my life when I fail, I feel insecure. I feel like, and oftentimes we look to our parents as foundation, right? It's like when my wife was pregnant for the first time and she was really sick, like I came home and she wasn't there, and she would always every day be on her parents' couch because that's where she felt foundation. She felt
taken care of.
Your foundation was shook multiple times in your life. Where do you go? I mean, is it your wife? Is it your kids? Where do you go for your foundation today?
Yeah.
In business, like when you struggle in business, you need somebody to kind of rely on. Do you have good mentors? Do you have good people in your life to?
Yeah, I want to answer that, but I do want to finish this story about my dad.
Please.
I wrote him a letter, and I told him what was happening in my life. I forgave him, and I asked for forgiveness because I recognized that my hands were dirty too. He wrote a letter back almost immediately, sent a $2 bill. I don't know why dads do that, but he sent a $2 bill and died less than 6 months later.
Wow.
And so I was able to button that up as I had advised Graham just before that. Now, you asked, where do I go? Because I don't go to parents. I also would love to say that I go to the church, but that's probably not true. And it's a difficult, weird relationship. When you spend a decade working at a place, and this is no fault of the church, it's just a byproduct of having worked in the ministry. When I show up there, it feels like work. I serve as a critic instead of a worship participant.
It's hard to transition.
And so I have to I have spiritual disciplines that feed my soul and people I learn from and grow with. But like, I am our senior pastor's coach. And so again, I'm brought into the inner working. So I'd love to say I go to church. I go to people that are oftentimes connected with the church and relationships that I have there. But the stronghold that I have in all this is my wife. But it's not the person that I married. At least I didn't expect it to be. I met my wife at church. I was 23. She was 20. I was an employee of the church. She was a youth group volunteer. So she was a college age volunteer helping our middle school and high school kids. And we fell in love. It's a fun little story, but my wife was all things passive and submissive and quiet. She had not yet recognized how strong that she was. And I don't think I recognized how strong that she was. Imagine I didn't have any parents. I didn't have anybody making rules. I didn't have any format. So I was calling all the shots. Well, as we've grown.
Especially with the higher D personality.
Oh my gosh.
It's easy to do that.
Yeah. My wife is all S. I'm all D and I. And so we were the exact opposites in that. It was, numerous times in my life. I can count every 5 years or so. I have huge business blowups, hiccups, things that don't go my way. My wife and I battled infertility for almost 4 or 5 years. Such a painful journey to try to get to be parents. We have dealt with family issues, as everybody has, but me being orphaned at the age of 21 and then dealing with these issues with my dad later on, I was trying to do it all on my own. And the strange thing is my wife, every time I'm struggling, she shows me how strong she is. And she has become for me this aspirational I want to be like my wife. I want to be strong like her. I want to be able to have this flex when everybody else around me is showing sadness and hardships. And she has been that person for me.
I know there's somebody listening right now that relates. I by no means am I going to take over this podcast and tell you my whole story.
No, I want to hear it, man.
And we could talk about it later. But I have a similar but different story to you. And I only bring that up right now to relate to the point of I rely on my wife oftentimes. In fact, when I feel like my wife's foundation is shaken a little bit, meaning like my ability to rely on her as my foundation, I struggle a lot because then it feels like I don't have anybody.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've gone through that with your relationship with your wife, but that
well, marriage is hard, man. And,
it is.
And in fact, we're here in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area because I'm leading a mastermind. And so my wife is with me, and we had a couple tough days before we got here. Wow. And tough days because we go at different speeds.
Well, you had just spent 2 weeks in Thailand every day together, so
we did, and that's a built-in speed. That built-in speed is intentionally a little bit laid back, and it was all focused on our kids and our experiences together. Well, now my wife, after 17 years of being a professional educator, is now staying at home. And I am all things gas pedal, and she is all things brake, and not parking brake, but like, she's all things brake. I imagine your wife may be of the same accord. Is you run at different speeds. Entrepreneurs and their spouses usually. She's like, you have a podcast 8:30 in the morning on Saturday. Like, no, I'm not okay with that. That was her exact answer. Well, please thank her for me.
Yeah, but it's like that's even normal to me. I'm like, what else am I going to do on Saturday morning?
Of course. And so as we're in all this right now, my wife and I had a couple of tense days and moments, and we got on the plane yesterday flying here, and we were able to talk through it and hear one another and understand each other more. And it doesn't always happen the first go, and it doesn't happen the second go, but we're so intentional on being great for each other that we don't stop. We don't stop chasing each other. And that for me is the greatest gift I've ever been given, is that somebody is chasing this broken, disheveled man to continue to try to be value in my life because she loves me relentlessly.
Yeah. And I think learning to be grateful, because I feel the same way, like the more grateful we are for that relationship, the more we value it. Yeah. How do you translate your experiences, you've gone through a lot more than a lot of people have, into your coaching? I want to call it a coaching business. So I definitely am going to connect a dot that you truly care about impacting others. Yeah. So let's just make that assumption right now for a second. But like when you're coaching, how do you get into life and the issues that are going on in their life, or is it pure business only?
I hate real estate. It's interesting. We're on a real estate podcast. That's what we're connected with. Real estate is not the passion that I have.
Is that your word? No, I'm just kidding.
It is not. Real estate is terrible. No.
Go with. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I'm at this place now when I get the privilege to coach people that my coaching has to be holistic. In fact, I started coaching for another company before I opened up my own, and I was fired 50% of the time and revered the other 50%, right? You get into a coaching relationship, and usually the goal is I need to make more money, and I need to try to lessen my headaches, and I need to try to get time back.
Or how do I get my team to perform like I do?
Of course. Yeah. Of course. And my coaching was, hey, how's your marriage? How's your health? What's your spiritual life like right now?
How are your foundations?
Yeah. So we talk about 6 F's: family, faith, fitness, finance, friendship, and fun. If you're not enjoying life, why are you doing this? So that's the fun element, right? Family. If you're not good at home, I have a chapter in, so I've written a couple of books. The first book I wrote is called Play for the Person Next to You. It's a servant leadership book. And I have a chapter called You Can't Not Have Cancer at Work. And so the idea is, if you're struggling at home, that of course is going to show its way into your work life. If you're struggling at work, that's of course going to show its way into your home life. So there is no separation there's no compartmentalization in my coaching and my leadership. It's all life. So as an example, and I love Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek will say, if you're really frustrated as a boss or a leader because somebody isn't performing well, the natural state is to go, all right, Ryan, for the last 3 quarters, you haven't hit your numbers. What the hell is going on? And that is, of course, what's burning inside of us. But Simon shows up and says, Ryan, for the last 3 quarters, you haven't hit your numbers. Are you doing okay? What's going on in your life, man? What's happening at home? Yeah. And so that kind of approach is how I handle my coaching as well. Somebody comes and they say, I want to make more money. I want to have less headaches. I want to have more time in my life. Awesome. Well, what's going on in your life that's causing all of this to spin? Because if you're only giving what you think is the Glengarry Glen Ross Wolf of Wall Street value to your team members, you're only going to have a certain relationship with them. And so my coaching is not by the book. My coaching is by the heart and that kind of connection.
I really like that. You know, when I was younger, Eric, when I was dating, I would have a girl that I thought I was going to marry, you know, not necessarily, but I was like, okay, this could be a relationship in terms of this. And like, she would break up with me. I mean, I would literally spend the next week worried about that. I couldn't work. I would show up to work, but emotionally it was tough to work. And my point in saying that is I'm sure when you're coaching, you know, when you got major life problems going on, it's hard to focus on work. It really is. It really seeps in.
You can't not have cancer, right? If you are cursed and blessed with cancer, and I say blessed because the hardest things in life are the things that create the best things for us. Your entire lens changes with everything. If your spouse is cheating on you, I can't imagine the worldview that you have and how everything is now perceived through that lens.
Sure. Every time that your spouse leaves and you can't get a hold of them, or you know, they're in a weird location on the Find My app or whatever.
Any ding on their phone. Like, we have a team member who just had a really, really tough violation of their family boundaries. And she had said, every time I get a notification on my phone, anxiety cripples me. And so how do you think she is at work right now? And so if I approach her and I say, listen, how are you performing right now?
Yeah, go make more phone calls.
Yeah. Everything I do right now is leadership focused, and leadership is an art. It's not a science. It is a heart. It's not a head. They have to operate together. You have to still have a North Star of where people want to go and aspirationally they're striving to get to. But this leadership game is gentle and slow.
Well, you know, that's the definition of God's love, right? And, you know, I know you're a spiritual guy, so you'll be welcome to this. I truly think the feeling of the Spirit is the connection of the heart and the mind. It's like when the heart and the mind connect, you know, because there's a lot of people that live off emotion.
Yeah.
And they consider that the heart, and there's a lot of people that live off logic.
Yeah.
But it's when those two things connect properly, that's when the Spirit can really be involved. And you brought that up multiple times on this podcast, the heart and the mind. And I really like that concept in general.
You know, I do a lot of writing. I try to write 3 or 4 times a week. Half of it goes on social. I email out most of it. And there's a spiritual undertone to all the things that I do. And one of my favorite writings as of late is when my head and my balls meet. Because the idea is it heart and balls or head and balls? I don't, either way. My balls are involved.
Your balls got involved somehow.
One way or the other.
And how do I incorporate my balls into this? Did ChatGPT help you with that one?
That's exactly right. The idea behind it is I think that I hear so many people in the world say, I want to go and serve the poor and needy, and I want to make a difference in the lives of my community, and I want to help rescue pets and whatever it may be. But we're immediately met with all these reasons why we can't. But we say, well, you got to have big balls to take big risks. And I want my balls to match that's such a weird thing to say, but I want my balls to match my passion for making a difference in this world. I want to be the most risk-taking, aggressive, fearless kind of person as a difference maker, because the world has enough takers. What if you're the most ferocious giver? I don't know about you, man, but every time I have given irresponsibly, I have felt better. I have felt more blessed. I have felt more abundance when I've given irresponsibly than when I've just held on too tightly.
I love the moments in life that you truly give and make an impact, and it's the unseen stuff. It's the not giving money to a charity. It's the like actually seeing a problem and helping solve it. And I think, you know, it's interesting because financially there's a lot of good that you and I and other people listening to this can do. But man, having your own house in order can really help people out emotionally and spiritually and in other ways of their business, which is such a, you know, I think one of the themes that I've found for this podcast is how important foundations are in your life, in different parts of your life. You talked about the 6 F's, right? And there's that whole family side of it we really dove into. But man, if any of those foundations are shook, I mean, it affects your ability to be successful. And I don't mean financially per se, just to be happy. I mean, joy, right? I think joy is a good word there.
Yeah, it absolutely
to go
is.
after.
You know, having worked in the ministry and then now moving into real estate, and my first year or two, I experienced what I diagnosed as wealth guilt. In 2011, when I went full-time into real estate, I made 5 times more what I had made as a full-time minister.
Wow.
And that was riddled with guilt because it's like, well, oh my gosh, why do I have all this money and what am I to do with this? And so I was irresponsible with it in some regards. And I tried to figure out what am I supposed to do? And then as I shared, I loved giving away and I loved empowering. And so my first thought was, well, I need to be this guy that just gives away all my money. And that's a cool business plan. And then there's also the idea of like, well, what if I kept some of that money and made more with it so I had more to give? And so now there's this next level of conflict of, well, maybe I hang on to all the money or do I give my time? And so I've been in this constant battle of weaving through and trying to figure out what to do. And for now, what I've come to the conclusion of is it's a balance, right? You still have to be responsible for giving generously. And at the same time, you have to be cognizant to build more of what you're currently doing. And so I'm trying to, as a dad of a 9 and a 7-year-old, I'm trying to not raise spoiled little a-holes. And
so hard.
I am scared to death because I didn't come from that world. And
the hardest thing to do is somebody with money. And you and I both know people a lot wealthier than we are. So it's not like we have money, but from our kids' perspective, we have money, right? Regardless of who we're comparing ourselves to, I have a buddy, his name's David Dodge out of St. Louis, and he was on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. And he's the most optimistic person I've ever met, right? Super successful, multimillionaire, great guy. And he's the most optimistic person ever. He missed a flight and he's like, hey, at least I didn't have to ride horse to get there. That would have taken longer. I'm like, David, where does this come from? Yeah. Well, he lost his parents when he was like 13 and 18 years old. Yeah. He then went on to sell drugs and literally got his pilot's license and was flying thousands of pounds of marijuana across the country until he got arrested, and then went to flip over 1,000 homes and just done crazy things. Crazy stories.
And he says to me on my podcast, he says, I don't compare myself to the millionaire next door. And I don't compare myself to the person in my community. I compare myself to the average person in the world. And every time I do, I recognize how blessed I am and how much abundance I have. And so as we look at that idea, it's like, well, how generous should I be and how generous can I be and how much do I have and how much can I give? And so now I'm at this place, and to be on your podcast here is such a privilege. I want to say thank you. And you had asked me before, like, well, what's the message I want people to hear? And it came to me. Okay. The message I want people to hear is hopefully a message of generosity. It is a message of your time, your talents, and your treasure. And I, in my early days of finding financial success, I didn't wait to be generous. I chose to be generous right away. And as I've done so, I've made more. Almost every time, almost every year, I've made more. The more I give back, or the more I give away, the more I seem to get back. And that, I think, is a contagious movement that's happening. Now, it's not just the money. I want to be really clear. I think that money is only a portion of wealth. Wealth is an abundance of time, which is the most valuable thing that we have. Wealth is an abundance of resources, and wealth is an ingrainment in the right community and culture of people that are surrounding you that absolutely love and adore you and will die for you and you for them. And I found that there was this opportunity for me to not just be a sole loan giver. I partnered with my friend Nick Shivers. He's an amazing agent out of Portland, Oregon. And we started something 7 years ago called Sell a Home, Save a Child, because we recognized that we couldn't be the only realtors that wanted to have our business have purpose and meaning behind it. And so we introduced title companies and lenders and realtors to this. Fast forward, we've raised over $5 million to help eradicate poverty for kids all around the world. And I just literally last week was in Thailand with my family doing mission work and exposure because we're working to eradicate human trafficking. And I'm partnering with an organization called Unseen. And I have been quietly giving. In fact, there's even scripture that talks about how you should give quietly. But I went to Ben Kinney, one of my mentors and my business partner at Place. And I had asked Ben, like, Ben, you're talking publicly about giving. Scripture says you're supposed to give pretty quietly. And I'm like, why are you doing that? He said, well, because I'm a leader and people are going to follow me. And if I talk about giving, I think I can inspire some other people to do. And so what voice do I want to have today on this is I want to encourage people to give. I'll give you an example here is every year we bring people to Fargo, North Dakota for a coaching summit that we do. It's more about leadership and personal development with the backdrop of real estate. I think it is unmatched and totally different than what anybody else does in this industry. And I'm really proud of it. We had about 270 people at our event last year. Team members and team leaders and that sort. And we do an impact party, which means that we have a few drinks and we listen to some music, and then we auction off things that are like coaching platform pieces and a retreat to my lake place and nothing fancy whatsoever. In that time of that live auction to help eradicate human trafficking, we raised $400,000 in 90 minutes.
Wow.
From a couple hundred realtors. Now, I've been to galas upon galas upon galas that have 1,000 people there, and it's this 7-course dinner and all this buttoned up, everybody dresses up, and they'll luckily raise a couple $100,000. And we, with a few drunk realtors and an aligned vision, all of a sudden raised $400,000 to help eradicate, because we got really good at telling a story and because everyone wants an invitation to give and they don't know how to do it or where to do it. And so maybe today, if someone's listening to this conversation, they hear an invitation, and it doesn't have to be my thing. But I will tell you all the abundance I found in my life, because if I compare myself with the average Joe in the world, I am the richest dude in Babylon. I am the guy that is on top of the world. And it is irresponsible of me not to try to encourage other people on how to get to this path. And I did not get to where I sit right now as a place that I'm really proud of. I didn't get here because I took. I got here because I gave. And the perception that I have of the world is I don't want spoiled rich kids. I want kids that are generous and thoughtful and caring and compassionate and empathetic, so that when the life does get them down, they love like God loves. And that's with empathy and generosity and care.
Well, the good news is I truly believe there's so much. I see it in my own kid. There are little things that my 93-year-old dad does that I see in my son all the time. So with how amazing your mother is, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is you want your kids to be like your mom.
Absolutely, I do.
You want them to turn into your mom. And, telling her story and talking, I'm sure, hopefully you do this.
All the time.
You talk about your mom a lot with them. And, you might not have their exact personality, but I bet your wife has some of those traits.
Yeah.
That's probably why you love her so much.
No doubt.
Well, you are on the Real Estate is show. Have you thought about your word?
Yeah.
Words? What's real estate to Erik?
I think it would be irresponsible not to say that real estate is ministry.
Interesting.
People hear ministry and sometimes you think ministry for me is not something that I do on a Sunday morning, and it's not tied to my church. It is the lifestyle that I'm choosing to live. Real estate is a lifestyle. When we're attracting people to our team, we talk about how, listen, this is a job that doesn't stop. In fact, it's not a job. It's not a career. It's a lifestyle, because you literally have to take on the form of. And for me, real estate, when I took on the form of being a businessman, I failed.
Interesting.
I got kicked out. I was self-serving. When I treat real estate as a form of ministry and giving back and being generous with my time, my talent, and my treasures, I continue to live a life that I am so grateful. Where I am now is where I never thought I'd be, ever.
So you're in your 40s, I imagine.
43. Yep.
Oh, so am I. What, 81?
80. Yeah.
Okay, we're really close. What do the next 20 to 30 years look like for you?
I have a buddy who retired at the age of 48 in real estate. And the reason why he retired is, and I'm so proud of him, is he said, I just stopped moving the goalposts. He's like, I figured out the money I needed to make and the life I wanted to live, and I went after that. The idea of retirement sounds terrifying to me.
Me too.
I don't ever want to retire because I love to create. I love to give. And so I don't know how this business is going to transform. I don't know if real estate is still going to be the vehicle that I live out my ministry, but I'm living a lifestyle. Real estate is the vehicle for my lifestyle. And so, I've been able to grow great businesses with my real estate team and with my coaching company and with flipping houses and with my alignment with Real and my partnership with Place. Like all these things
got a rental portfolio that's giving you cash flow.
Yeah. I mean, I could retire today if I so chose. I just choose not to. Simon Sinek talks about how we play this infinite game, that it's not like an exact thing that we're trying to win today. The infinite game that I'm playing is best articulated in my first book. And I introduced the book by saying, one of my mentors asked me what I want my life to be like. And I said like, well, I want to have this incredible autobiography. And then as soon as I said it, I'm like, that feels gross. In the autobiography, I'll say I climbed Kilimanjaro, or I know how to spell Kilimanjaro. Like those are great.
I can't even spell ministry. So there's no way I'm spelling Kilimanjaro, just so we're both clear.
And then he said to me something that is forever my mantra in life. And he said, Erik, wouldn't it be a better journey to be a chapter in everybody else's books?
Wow.
And I thought,
that's impactful.
That's what I'm doing. And so what are the next 20 to 30 years is I got a lot of books I want to be a part of. And my own autobiography will probably come from that. But instead of me trying to figure out how do I win, I got to figure out how do I help other people to win.
How do you serve others?
Yeah. And so what does that look like the next 20 to 30 years? I don't know the vehicle that's going to be. There's going to be flying cars. Is it going to be Back to the Future 2 shoes that are like hoverboards? And I don't know. I'm just here to go wherever God points my opportunities and try to serve well. So,
being from North Dakota, you do a good job with your mastermind of getting out and meeting other people. You're a part of Place with Ben Kinney, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a great network of people. I'm sure that would be my fear. It's interesting looking at North Dakota. It's like, man, I'm in this small town. Who wants to come to North Dakota? I have to get out and meet people.
Yeah.
But you've done a good job of getting out there. And it's how you got on this show is that there was a realtor here in Phoenix that said, hey, you got to have Erik on.
David.
You and I didn't know each other before this, and we probably may not have met, and it's just really, you've done a great job of getting your name out there and really in it. And I think the best at it are people that truly are genuine people. I talk a lot about genuineness, and it's the people I connect with are genuine. The show, and you've done your own podcast, I'm sure you've run into this too. It's the people that aren't genuine, that are more fake, that are the hardest to interview. They're so hard. Oh my gosh, I struggle with it.
I have not published a couple of my podcasts because they just felt robotic. And so my podcast is called the Redefine Podcast. I want to redefine how people treat people and life experiences. So I find really successful people, and then we highlight their success for 5-ish minutes. And then I spend the next 40 to 50 minutes figuring out the dumpster fire it took and the hardships that they've gone through in order to get there. I think that when we talk about our successes, it breeds competition and creates insecurities. When we talk about our brokenness, it creates community and compassion. And so I want to talk about that. And
you've noticed with the structure of this podcast, we started off talking about your volume and your transactions, but I tried really hard and you did a great job of steering it away from that as fast as we could, because people want to hear, and the people listening, they get value out of relating to you. Mm-hmm. And there is someone else listening that lost their mom to cancer and lost their dad at an early age to, a lot of different things like that. And I really am grateful, Erik, that you were willing to get personal. I struggle with getting personal when we don't have a genuine friendship beforehand. So it's a struggle of mine because I care so much about genuineness and friendships. And I don't like to get personal with people that don't treat it properly.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And thank you for taking the risk to do that with me, who you don't know, if that makes sense. And I think we have a deeper level of connection, and hopefully those listening will take what you said and be more generous with their time. And I love that, because everybody talks about generosity with their treasure. And I truly believe, in generosity with your time. And it's something that people don't talk about. It's the greatest gift. Oftentimes wealthy people, truly wealthy people, I know can give me is some of their time. Mm-hmm. because the wealthier you get, your time becomes more important sometimes. And I wouldn't say more important, but you get busier with responsibility and people you're responsible for.
I don't protect my money in terms of I don't monitor it like a hawk, and I trust the things that I've set up and that they're going to operate. And then it'll come to me like, oh shoot, that rental's been vacant for 3 months and somebody wasn't, and so that's a little bit frustrating. But the things that irk me are the time thieves of the world. And sometimes those are people, but sometimes those are choices that I'm making. The rabbit hole of TikTok to the draw into the things that aren't filling our souls. And don't get me wrong, there's always a time and a space where you need to unplug. But as an example, every Friday morning, I told you the 6 F's that I care about, and friendship is one of them. And most entrepreneurs are parched for friendship. Your friendships are tied to...
It's why people join masterminds, is to become friends with people that are like them.
And those friendships that we do have are tied within the industry. And so if something goes awry in the industry, well, now everybody's of the same. So I, 7 years ago, formed a Friday morning breakfast group. And I'm the only person that's in real estate. It's just a bunch of buddies. And we just give each other a hard time and are so completely inappropriate over breakfast every Friday morning. And that little 60-minute time is a gift that I give myself, is a gift that I give them, but I'm intentional on making sure that I'm not always robotic in the business. Because being robotic in the business of I'm going to be in every mastermind, I'm going to read every book, like we need those times to decompress, and we need those times where we don't have to be on, where we're not learning all the time. And so maybe that's TikTok for somebody, and maybe that's a stupid Bravo TV show for my wife, and maybe it's a breakfast group on Friday morning. But I think that you have to make sure that you are spending your time not only generously with people, but also selfishly for yourself.
Interesting. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
It's a joy.
It's been great having you on.
Yeah, thank you, brother.